microphones. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the wedge neighborhood right now.
Welcome to another episode of the Wedge Live podcast. And today my co-host is Jason Garcia. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to come back on and talk with you.
This is your third appearance, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be like the Elliot Gould of the Wedge Live podcast, I guess.
Is Elliot Gould famous for?
Early on in Saturday Night Live, he was like a repeat host pretty often. And then like other people like Alec Baldwin eventually ended up, hosting more than him and then being on the show and things like that. But
well, eventually we will have our Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I
For
assume
now we'll settle for you.
Yeah, I mean more of the Billy Baldwin, I suppose.
Yeah,
one of the lesser Baldwins.
And so later on in the show, we're going to be joined by our first mayoral candidate. You excited?
I am. I'm thinking that this is going to be a big step forward for the podcast. It's really going to make Jacob sit up and pay attention.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. It's like as the guests get more and more, higher up the food chain, I'm worried I'm going to screw this up.
I mean, people would be disappointed if you didn't. I think
my chair is in the right place, Jason.
You look good though. You've got your patented cat photo or cat painting over your shoulder.
I changed it up. Not only do I have the giant microphone, I have the white hoodie on today.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's a good look for you. You look
seasons are changing.
Yeah, you look like and you've got a nice large cup.
Yeah, a big mug. I actually ordered a Wedge Live branded mug so that I could do this.
Oh, do all of your guests get those as well? Is that some sort of promotion?
We should pre-mail a package so they can, have a pink headset, a big mug,
a much smaller microphone.
Yeah, because I need the big microphone because I'm the boss. This is my podcast.
Exactly. It's like David Letterman having to have the tallest chair.
Do you enjoy David Letterman? Are you of that era?
I mean, when I was young, it was more that my older cousins really liked David Letterman. So if I got to stay up late and watch David Letterman, it felt kind of like I was doing something transgressive and, listening to jokes that I didn't understand, but my cousins thought were very funny.
I watched David Letterman, Conan.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's, the difference between you being a millennial and me being a member of Gen X is that Conan didn't take over until I was in college already. So he felt like, kind of the first person of my era to have a show like that.
And what are the kids listening to today?
I assume some sort of podcast, some sort of YouTube show. I don't think
the Wedge Live podcast.
There are definitely some kids who are college age watching the Wedge Live podcast. Yes,
a couple hundred at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we bump up the viewership. We get the young kids to watch and just leave us on in the background while they're playing their video games and things.
Did you watch the mayoral forum?
I did.
What'd you think?
It was. I will say it was rough for some of the candidates. I think it was interesting because most of them were just reading prepared statement or prepared answers to questions, and some of them it really felt like that's all they were doing was just reading an answer.
Yeah.
which I can understand. It's early in the process, and a lot of them don't necessarily have that experience of kind of speaking off the cuff and things like that. But there were definitely a few points where it felt like even though they did have the questions in advance, some of them were a little unprepared to actually answer the question.
Yeah. It's basically 3 candidates I felt who are running to win. It's also you don't get many opportunities to, or at big events where everyone's going to tune in and hear your message. So you kind of want to make sure there's the pressure to make sure you hit all the points. You don't miss anything. You've only got 2 minutes. There's so many candidates. So the tendency is to want to script it and make sure you hit everything. Because if you're going off the top of your head, you might seem more natural, but you're going to miss something. And
right. Yeah. And I mean, it was very interesting to have that sort of a forum on a Saturday morning at 10:30.
Yeah, that's too early.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of viewers. We heard from friend of the pod, Devin Hogan, that they had over 1,000 people at any given time viewing.
It's probably had a lot more sense.
Yeah, and I think that's great. It's a surprising turnout for me as far as viewership, but hopefully as the process goes on and the field narrows down a little bit, if it does, I mean, it could be that these are the candidates.
It's not going to narrow. We're going to have more candidates by the time we come to the end, because I was watching a March 2017 forum.
Yeah.
And it was like a totally manageable number of candidates, like 5 or 6, which is about what we have now, right? And then by the time we got to the end, it was 17 people on a stage, and opening statements took half an hour.
Yeah, I don't know. This year it seems very different than 2017, though, just in terms of the interest in running for a lot of different seats.
It's a bad time to be an elected official.
Yeah, it's a very difficult time, and I think that does speak to the characters of some of the people who are running, that they're willing to take this on right now.
Yeah, you've basically got 2 kind of candidates: people who just want to be elected to something and will endure any kind of pain to do that and be elected to something, and you've got people who care a lot about changing the way the city functions and will give up a comfortable, peaceful life to try to make that happen.
Well, and you forgot the type of candidate that the incumbent is, which is somebody who is just willing to take any amount of money they can to try to keep the status quo exactly where it is.
Yeah, I don't hate Jacob Fry, but he has no core. That's what bothers me about him.
Yeah, watching the forum on Saturday and then watching a bit of his Ward 4 and Ward 5, I don't know what he referred to it as, like a caucus event. He really just said the same things in each event, and to the word. He was very scripted, very, very much staying on message no matter what. And
he's the change candidate.
To all that are listening, this. We have a mandate for change. Intent is important, but this city and indeed this state have been resting on good intention and pretty words for far too long.
Yeah, the change candidate. Once he gets this incumbent out of the way, there's no limit to what he can accomplish.
Can he pull that off? Are people going to buy it? I'm worried because Jason, I still think he's the front runner.
Yeah,
more likely than not, he's going to be reelected.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that more likely than not he's going to be reelected. I think at this point he is the front runner, but I just don't think that he has enough there to maintain a non, kind of oppositional candidacy. When people, ask him about his record and specific things, he doesn't have answers. He just talks around it, and it's becoming more and more obvious.
I don't know that the case is being made explicitly enough by his opponents or by, local media. And we can't count on WCCO
Right.
to do a story on, the failures of Mayor Fry.
Right.
I don't know who's gonna challenge him, who's gonna see it, who's gonna hear it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that those are really good questions to ask the other candidates, as far as what their strategy is to address the Fry years, basically.
Yeah, because I spoke with someone really smart who I respect the day of the forum, and that was their concern. Like Fry had a really bad couple of weeks going into it, and nobody made the case. Nobody hit him hard enough to make it clear that this is not the guy. It's not
Yeah,
the person to put back in office.
yeah, and I do think that some of that is that so much of this was scripted, and people were really, like you said, trying to address these questions. And I feel like no campaign is real like scrappy out of the gate. I think that
Yeah.
that sort of thing heats up the longer that candidates stay in the running.
Yeah, there's a lot of time left. Like, things could happen between now and the election that feel like the most important thing that has happened this term could happen between now and the election to change things up.
Yeah,
I think I'm hoping that's not the case, because I can only imagine those would be bad things. So, but they can happen.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what would happen, over the next 5 months or whatever, that would really eclipse what what happened last year.
Yeah.
And that's kind of those are the issues that are going to carry this whole election at the mayoral, city council, even BET and park board elections are going to be swayed by that. Which, if you would have told me that last year at this time, that something was going to happen that was going to be the defining issue, and it wasn't going to be the Trump election, I wouldn't have believed it.
Everybody thought it was going to be triplexes, Jason.
I know.
Big issue of 2021. We're voting you all out because of triplexes.
Yeah. I mean, when you drive around Minneapolis, you still get to see all of the signs that say vote them all out.
Defund the city council.
Yes. It's interesting to see, where sort of the traditional, power structure has been, and see how those people are reacting and sort of taking up the positions as though they've been aggrieved for the last 30 years or whatever, and making themselves out to be the victims because people are asking for things like rent control and, affordable access to transit and services. And all of a sudden, the people who have never had to worry about that are acting like, someone is trying to take away their home and bulldoze it right in front of them.
Yeah. Hello, Sheila. Welcome to the
Hi.
show. Jason and I have been doing the pre-show banter before you got here. So,
oh, great. Wonderful.
You're joining the show already in progress.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, it's so exciting to be here.
This is where I introduce you.
Oh,
we
wonderful.
are joined by Sheila Nezhad, who is running for mayor in Minneapolis. I think I'll leave it there and just jump in. Are you settled? You ready to go?
I think I'm settled. Well, hi, everyone. Yeah, it's true. I'm Sheila Nezhad. I am running for mayor. I use she, her pronouns. My dog, Ruby, is also here with me today.
Okay.
She's sleeping right now, though.
Okay. So Ruby's not going to make an appearance.
Well, we'll see. There are 5 small dogs who live next door. So when they go out, Ruby tends to wake up.
Because I enjoyed the mayoral I guess the DFL put out like a 20-minute video of citywide candidates, and you were holding Ruby the whole time.
This is Ruby, and I'm running for mayor of Minneapolis. Yes.
I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Campaign mascot.
Yeah. Some people have said that Ruby is already the breakout character of the electoral cycle. So does Ruby have any, any plans or aspirations beyond the upcoming election?
Yeah, I think Ruby is really looking forward to being first dog. She enjoys attention, and she and I share a priority of wanting a municipal shoveling program because her legs are only 4 inches tall. So it's real hard to get around in the wintertime.
You could get the city council to rewrite the ordinance that once the snow is too tall for Ruby, you got to get out there and shovel.
Exactly.
So Jason and I were talking about how rough it is to be an elected official right now. It's potentially not a lot of fun. There's not going to be a lot of fun parts of the job. Are you prepared to be the subject of mean editorials in the Star Tribune, people coming to your house, hate mail?
Well,
are you ready to do that?
Let me tell you what, John. That's all already happened through my organizing work. So had the pleasure of, I wrote an op-ed a couple months ago about not wanting the National Guard to be reactivated, which happened anyway, and got the pleasure of many an email calling me a snowflake. What an honor.
Okay.
So I'm ready. And this summer, through my work with Reclaim the Block, I had people trying to hack my bank account, come into my house, all that sorts of stuff. So I guess I'm ready.
Okay. So I guess talk about your work with Reclaim the Block, because I know you, a lot of people probably know you as the person who shows up to budget hearings every year, leading your crew to call for reinvesting money away from the Minneapolis Police Department into these alternative programs. Way before 2020, you were one of the people leading that effort.
Yes. And I'm going to pause here because I've got a dog whining at the door, and I'm just going to go let them in real quick. It's turning into an escalated situation.
Okay. Jason, I've had dog emergencies before on the show, so I'm going to handle this pretty well. We'll be okay.
Great.
It's going to be okay.
I've had dog emergencies in real life, but not on a podcast.
All right, we're back.
Okay.
Great.
So yeah, I am a co-founder of Reclaim the Block. And so it all started actually with Mayor Fry. So back in early 2018, there was a revival of the Poor People's Campaign, and they were doing different issue-based actions. And one of them was on police violence. And so they held an action at the mayor's office. It was an occupation. They built a grave to commemorate those who were killed by MPD and wanted the mayor to come out and speak. And I am also a member of a group called MPD 150, and we were invited to be a part of that. And the mayor never came out and spoke with us. He saw us at the end of the hallway and turned around and walked away. But his policy staff did come talk to us. And out of that, Reclaim the Block was born as an organization because none of the organizations who were in that action wanted to specifically work on policy related to policing in Minneapolis. So out of that was born our first budget fight, in which we demanded a 5% divestment of the MPD, general divestment that would be moved into broad-based safety strategies like housing, healthcare, youth programming. And we were pretty much laughed out of town with that 5% divestment request, which is funny to think about because in this past year, 2020, what we heard, people were saying, well, why aren't you asking for 50%? So just
Right.
goes to show how much has changed. But so my role now, I started as staff this fall with Reclaim the Block, and I am one of the policy organizers. So I read the whole budget every year and find out what we're spending money on and what we could shift funding into that would build real safety.
You're the one in charge of finding how much we spend on police horses.
Let me tell you, that was my personal project for the summer because, and I think both of you probably know, you've dug around in OpenGov before. It's hard to find out exactly what the city's spending money on. And so I was clicking and expanding the tab after tab after tab and found the mounted patrol line item and found that it was somewhere right around $900,000. And brought it to the council and said, hey, did you know we spend close to $1 million on maintaining a fleet of horses? To which all of them replied, we spend what? And
Oh,
we
so
instead...
you really were the person who dug out the police horse thing. I was kind of joking.
Yeah, no, it was me.
Okay.
And it
Thank
became
you.
like a running joke over the summer
Right. 'Cause
among my colleagues and in trainings.
a police horse does the work of 20 regular police humans, I hear.
6.
Oh,
I think it was
6? I thought it was
6, I believe.
20.
Really? Okay, I could be wrong.
I think somebody said 20.
Oh, it sounds like the horses in Minneapolis are lazy.
Yeah.
If they're only doing the work of 6, and maybe in Florida where you're from, John, they can accomplish the work of 20 police officers.
Yeah, we need some police Clydesdales. So you're still doing the reclaim the block work as you're running for mayor.
I am, yeah.
So if you weren't running for mayor right now, you would be doing that. Would you be doing anything else with your time?
Yeah, I have another job. I work at Ricardo Levins Morales Art Studio as well. So my formal title is Minister of the Interior.
Okay.
Which means
Wow.
I'm the administrative assistant.
But I mean, so running for mayor is taking up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
That you could be doing something else with, right?
Yeah.
Are you giving up a lot of hobbies, TV shows? What are you giving up?
I ran out of good TV pretty much halfway into the pandemic, which is why I listened to every single one of those charter commission meetings. It was like the best entertainment I could get, honestly.
Painful.
What I had planned on doing today was to reject the council amendment.
You have a stronger stomach than I do, for sure. So, aside from the Wedge Live podcast, are there any podcasts that you listen to or YouTube shows that you might enjoy?
Yeah, I love another local podcast, the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. And this winter, I did get into You're Wrong About, which is like sort of history. I mean, the name says it all, but I got really into their 5-part Princess Diana story, like deeply invested in the Princess Diana story, and also Jessica Simpson's autobiography.
Oh, wow.
So an audiobook? Is that an audiobook? Or?
It's an audio. Well, okay. So here's my confession is I first listened to the 3-part podcast summary book club of her book and then went on to listen to the audiobook because I loved it so much. And I never thought I would say this, but Jessica Simpson is an inspiration.
Okay. All right.
Wow.
We can clip that part of the podcast and put it on Twitter.
I stand by it.
I feel bad that I'm co-hosting now. This seems like it would have been a natural for Taylor.
Yeah.
Well, I can come back,
Get Taylor on your phone, Jason, and
I mean, we'd run out of time talking about Princess Di and Jessica Simpson.
We should probably get to public safety.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into public safety, just to set the reality of how I experienced 2020, because I don't think a lot of people have the same assessment of where we've been and where we are now. for me, it was about the catastrophic failure of the Minneapolis Police Department, our existing system of public safety. And the risk for me is in the current system. I'm not afraid of changing, doing something new. I think we need to do something new. Keeping the system, trying to patch it together as it was, and hope the reforms stick this time feels like the risk. So that's not a question. I felt like getting that out of the way. So one of the things Mayor Fry is saying is that this is a choice between eliminating the police department, that's his definition of the choice this year, or keeping and reforming them. He's also said, I support a both and approach. Do you share his assessment of what the choice is for voters this year?
No, I don't, which is
Okay.
perhaps not surprising.
Dig in.
I think that so we're talking about the charter amendments, right?
Well, that's definitely a part of it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think
I'm talking about the choice between you, the other candidates, and Mayor Fry mostly.
mm-hmm.
But obviously the charter amendment is part of that question too.
Yeah.
Kind of how you define the possibilities of reimagining public safety versus his more black and white, either people are going to get rid of the police or we're going to reform them.
Yeah, like tomorrow the police are gone. You elect the wrong person. Tomorrow the police are gone. I'm the only person that can keep the police around. It's basically It's a fear-based campaign is how I read it.
Yes. Yeah, I resonate with that assessment. The way I see it is how we define safety. And I think right now, public safety under our current administration is defined as policing, right? So I, in my campaign, have been working to expand the conversation from police to safety. Because when we talk about and define safety for ourselves, for our families, for our neighborhoods, it includes things like having safe housing, like having enough income to be able to meet all the needs you have and to do fun things too, right? Like one of the values of my campaign is we deserve to thrive, not just survive. And I think we've seen that over and over again of the services offered by the government really just lie on that survive line, right? It's like we're going to hand out everyone socks at the encampment, but they're going to be all one size and one color, and that's it. But in terms of safety, what I've been talking about is building safety through meeting people's basic needs and coming up with ways of addressing conflict and harm that don't involve guns or cages. And that is absolutely not going to happen overnight. We've had the police nationally as our primary model for addressing safety for 150 years. And we're not going to come up with, well, let me backtrack. First of all, there's going to be no one-to-one replacement for police. And there shouldn't be, right? What we've done over the years is pile more and more responsibilities into this one role. And so what we first need to do is look at, okay, what are the police charged with? Kind of take that apart and then figure out where do we have existing alternatives. So mobile mental health teams, sending out healthcare workers to healthcare crises. Bam, we got that. Where are places where we need to stretch and dream and experiment, like dealing with interpersonal conflict? That's going to take some time to get it right. But what we know is that our current model is not working to address the things that we are charging it to address, right?
Right. Yeah. And I last summer had a few conversations with Mayor Fry about policing and the need for change and reimagining how safety in Minneapolis works. And one of the things that he kept coming back to is telling me that if I could come to him with policies that were ready to be enacted, he would take a look at them. There wasn't even a promise that if I brought him policy that he would try to get it enacted. It was that he would look at it. I pointed out to him that I wasn't the person who had spent, thousands and thousands of dollars asking people to make me the mayor. But I also, with him, used the analogy that it's like you're driving a car without brakes at this point. And when you're in that situation, you're not saying, what sort of new car should I get? Should I look at an SUV? Should I look at a hybrid? Your first responsibility is to stop the car safely. And it's been really disappointing that he hasn't seen that urgency, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about, your experience in movement work and things like that, I know that you're very well respected in, those quote unquote movement circles, and people think very highly of you and the work that you've done. But what sorts of things can you do, or will you do, or are you currently doing to reach out past that and engage with people who might look at it and say, well, no, like we can't change right now. Look at how unsafe everything is. So like, how do you plan to win those people over and, have them supporting your campaign and helping you get elected?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yeah, I'm doing that every single day, right? I'm calling through every ward right now and having a variety of conversations. And I think it comes with meeting people where they're at, right? If people are experiencing fear, that fear is valid. How it relates to other people's experiences is different, right? But, we heard people calling into the budget hearings last fall saying, I'm afraid to walk my dog. And I believe them that they feel afraid, right? And so I think my job as a candidate and hopefully as mayor is to get to focusing on solutions. So if you want to stop seeing cars stolen in your neighborhood, let's think about why people are stealing cars. Probably because they don't have a car or they don't have access to an income stream that's as lucrative as selling a car, right? So if we want to stop cars from being stolen in your neighborhood, which makes you feel less safe, spending tens of thousands of dollars on helicopters and then getting people into the legal system will not make it easier for them to get a car or get the income to get a car, right? So it comes to breaking down to I want to fully fund safety solutions. And when we break it down and talk about safety and talk about root causes, I think that's where we can get away from some of the polarization that comes with talking about police or no police. And then from a nerdier perspective, so my role, right, is to look at the budget every year and see what's in the city budget. And what I've learned is that there is so much money in the MPD budget that has nothing to do with officers on the ground. We spend, I think it's still around $10 million on their community and collaborative advancement division, which is like the PR division, 10 million. And another 8 million on special operations, which is like SWAT gear, riot gear, all the stuff we saw used against protesters, surveillance stuff that we also have ample access to if you wanted to use it, which I don't. But if you wanted to, county, state, federal levels all have that gear. We don't, as a city, need to be bankrolling that. So it also looks at saying, okay, defund the police can mean a lot of things. And it can also start at these places that are the peak violence of policing that we can use to start address those root causes of harm and unsafety in the community.
Yeah, that's one of my frustrations is people acting as if defunding the police resulted in fewer cops last year. Well, a lot of cops quit, decided they didn't want the job, they went off on medical leave, and the city's hiring cops as fast as they can right now. So you take the money away from some of those extras that have nothing to do with personnel. That's my axe to grind. But anyway, so what do you think people misunderstand about your campaign when it comes to public safety? Like, what maybe people who think you're too far out there, you're too radical. What are the things that people are getting wrong about your campaign that you have to correct them on?
That's a good question. I think the number one question I get is, okay, but what does this mean for when you get into office? What will you actually do about policing? Kind of what's the breakdown there? And I think to that I answer, okay, the first part is demilitarization. So we can start easily at that special operations level. Decriminalization, developing alternatives like mobile mental health teams, and then addressing those underlying conditions that lead to.
I have a related question, if I could
Yeah.
jump in. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh yeah. Go
So,
ahead.
what does the Minneapolis Department of Public Safety look like at the end of your first term?
That is a great question. I think that needs to be determined through community process. I think part of the transition needs to be building in real engagement, right? Not just a survey monkey. Shout out to the city staff who already took on a ton more work than they already had to start working on this transforming public safety work. But I think that the new department, we can sketch out some broad buckets of the work it does, but in terms of the actual operations, how it works with different cultural communities, that needs to be developed through an iterative community process. And we need to allow enough time for it too, right? We can't just have the city coming down and saying, okay, here's the solution. 150 years of policing wasn't working, but we came up with the new solution overnight. But I think what we can have is like the basic emergency response in place.
So one of the things that you mention a lot and talk about during your campaigning is the concept of co-governing with citizens and developing policy from the ground up with community feedback. Can you explain a little bit about your vision of how that works, and especially in this instance of reimagining public safety? How would that look different than the way that we currently process things and seek feedback? And what are some challenges that you might see with that model, like when it comes to people who may disagree completely with you, and want their voices to be heard just as much as anybody else?
Right. Yeah. No simple question. I think one thing I'm really excited about is participatory budgeting. So that's like a great starting point of we set aside a pot of money and set up a longer, more accessible process for people to decide how it's spent. And we saw other cities really leading with that in this last year. Seattle put aside a whole bunch of money. Portland set aside some money, and some of it was supposed to be directed directly by folks experiencing homelessness for solutions. So I think, and then of course, those are always at the risk of being good in name, but not successful in implementation. And I think one thing that is, well, there's so many things. I keep saying one thing. You just asked to come in. Now you want to go out? No. Dogs of the Wedge podcast.
Participatory dog parenting.
One way we get towards co-governance, first step is investing more in the city's communications department. This poor communications department is just working so hard, and it's so difficult to know what's going on at the city. Even I, as someone who it's like my full-time job, get confused clicking through 7 layers of links in LIMS to try to find the contract that they're talking about in the meeting, you know? So baby steps, participatory budgeting, more communications infrastructure, and I would love to see people paid to be on the city advisory committees. There's over 700 volunteers on the city advisory committees, and I was talking to someone who I think was on, or had a friend who was on the workplace advisory committee, and said, you know, a few meetings in, it was only the execs from the corporations who could still come because they were getting paid to come, right?
Right.
So those are baby starting points for public safety. I think we could look at things like people's movement assemblies, community specific gatherings that kind of bubble up into larger congresses. But the charge is, and what didn't happen this last year with the council's commitment, is putting enough resources behind that process. What happened this year is the council, at the urging of organizers, said, we're going to do this year-long stakeholder engagement process. But there is no additional staff for it, right?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you all think? I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I know I'm being interviewed, but I'm curious.
I mean, from my perspective, that's, you know, in any sort of leadership role, that's always the hardest part, is navigating sort of opposing desires from various stakeholders, you know, trying to figure out how you're going to achieve an end that is desirable without watering down what you're trying to accomplish. And you know, that it's a really difficult concept, even when you're, you know, working with a small organization, much less an entity the size of the city of Minneapolis. And from the role of mayor, you know, it's a very difficult way to try to lead when you're that one person who doesn't necessarily have the legislative control that the city council does. You know, you can certainly set objectives and expectations for outcomes, but it's hard to necessarily guide it there. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, who have traditionally had the power in the status quo, John and I were talking about this earlier, are right now acting like they're the ones who are being oppressed, but they're the ones who also have the most resources and can make the most noise when they feel like they're not getting their way. And that, I think, is, you know, one of the things that is the biggest challenge. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I always come back to neighborhood associations and the idea of this is not what the neighborhood wants. And the idea that the 6 people who came to that neighborhood association meeting represent what the neighborhood wants. Well, that's not the case. So I am, in that way, I am skeptical of processes like that. It's about who are you bringing in?
Right.
Mm-hmm. My early start in safety beyond policing, rabble rousing, was actually at the neighborhood association level. I was on the Lyndale Neighborhood Association board, where
it's a gateway.
It's a gateway. And I learned about this, you know, they had a crime and safety committee, as many do. And it started out great. You know, in the 90s, they bought houses, fixed them up, would sell them to folks to come move into the neighborhood. And they had, they still have this group called the Lyndale Walkers, which is like a violence interrupters model, right? They would walk around the neighborhood with these bright green hats and interact with people, build relationships, break up tense conversations. But it had evolved over the years to be very pro-police. And the one fundraiser they had every year was to hire more bike cops for the neighborhood. And for me, as a board member, I was saying, okay, our neighborhood needs so much, right? Lindale, I moved out of Lindale, now I'm in Central, but Lindale has a large immigrant population. The neighborhood association ran all these English language learner classes that, were like cobbled together grant to grant. And yet here we were fundraising for bike cops, which were then charged to patrol around Horn Towers, which is where most of the Black residents live in Lindale, right? So we held the
Bike cops are a very standard budget item for neighborhood associations. My neighborhood too. If you look at neighborhood budgets, NRP budgets, bike cops are very common.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, so I organized a neighborhood safety forum to discuss just what does safety mean to us. And it got past that 6 people who normally come to the safety meetings, right? Because they held their safety meetings in the police station, in the community room of the 5th precinct, which is now barred off with barbed wire. And the Lindale Neighborhood Association helped pay for part of that meeting room in the 5th precinct. Anyway, it was so controversial. We got a bunch of neighborhoods together, so controversial that Fox 9 came down to cover our neighborhood meeting on safety.
Tom Lydon?
No, it was, what's her name? Christina? Maybe?
Okay.
I
only know Tom Lydon.
Wasn't Tom. But it was a neighbor who worked for Fox who called to invite them to come cover our meeting in Painter Park. Anyway, that was a really long story about neighborhood associations, I guess.
We love long stories about neighborhood associations.
Yeah, that's John's whole thing. That's how he started.
Used to be my whole thing. Maybe we could get the cat tour started as a violence interrupter model. Get that funded by the city. We're just out here interrupting violence. Looking at cats.
I mean, nothing would interrupt violence faster than a horde of 1,000 people roaming the street.
Yeah. Although we got the police called on the cat tour in whenever the last one was. Police were called.
Wow.
But,
what was the formal complaint?
Well, 300 people in the middle of Colfax Avenue, I think, was the complaint.
Oh, okay.
Scared people.
Wow.
Okay, where are we now? Okay. Operation Safety Now. That's where I am on my outline here.
Wait, Operation Safety
weapons.
Now or Operation Safety Net?
Yeah, so the multi-jurisdictional law enforcement military operation that we had in Minneapolis, not the coalition of crime-themed Facebook pages. Got to keep those distinct. Thank you, Jason. So people didn't want a repeat of what happened in 2020. Obviously, George Floyd was killed by the police. There was unrest. The 3rd precinct burned. Large, portions of Lake Street on fire. So people didn't want a repeat of that. But I think you probably would agree that, rubber bullets and gassing protesters is not the way to prevent that. But what do you tell the people who are concerned and think maybe it was necessary to have that, soldiers on street corners, that militarized response? Like, how do you keep the city from burning in a situation like that?
Thank you. This is the number one question I get asked as a candidate. I think, well, first of all, as someone who has been on the ground, I was in Brooklyn Center. I was at the 3rd precinct the night the auto zone burned. I got shot by the police as a medic. Having a militarized presence escalates situations. Even the enforcement of a curfew. So I was in Brooklyn Center and you could feel, and were either of you there during the protests a couple of weeks ago? No.
Briefly.
Yeah. Were you there at curfew?
No, I drove some people home before curfew because they
Okay.
were concerned about getting kettled and
Yeah,
not getting home.
rightly so. So at the moment of curfew, so your phone buzzes, goes off when curfew is about to be instilled, and the tension just spiked in the group.
Because immediately you're all breaking the law, right?
Right. Um,
Basically, it's immediately the police have an excuse to do whatever they think they want to do.
Yeah.
right. And it's about the state trying to control our movement, right? Not just like political movement, like physical movement, right? Um, and so these measures escalate situations in favor of protecting property. What I would do as mayor, first of all, I would do so many things different leading up to, I would not have advocated for a $14 million expansion in the police budget in 2019 that ended up being $9 million or whatever it was. But what I would do, number one, hot food and bathrooms for everyone who's gathering to protest. Because when someone dies, what you do is bring them food and make sure they're comfortable and feel cared for. And nothing. If you've been to a protest before, or even a public event, when there's not a bathroom, right, things get stressful. So that's like bare minimum. I know we can do it. We whip out like however many bathrooms for Vikings games. We have the resources. So hot food and bathrooms is the first one. The second one is, so protests happen because of grief and justice denied. So how do you deal with grief? Not with someone with a long gun. That's not a great way of addressing someone's grief. I would advocate for free mental health counseling, pop-up counseling clinics at every park building and school that also had free kids activities, because kids are so stressed out. Kids were so stressed out. The fact that we switched to distance learning in preparation of the verdict just shows the impact that this is having on our kids' psyches. So free mental health counseling, trauma counseling at parks and schools, and then addressing justice denied. As mayor, I would work with the council as best I could. We'll see how things shake out, but making a clear commitment on how power and funding is going to be moved away from violent policing and towards building real community safety with a long-term vision, and also a portion of those funds to be released as quickly as possible to be directed by BIPOC community or Black community in the wake of the protests. So the immediate mutual aid response. And all of those things, I think, would contribute to a de-escalated situation, right? And we would support small businesses who were hurt when they were shuttered, right? We could have restaurants cater, provide food to folks. We could have businesses serve as pop-up sites if they wanted to for mental health counseling. It's like, people sometimes look at me like I'm crazy when I propose this. But if you think about it as in terms of, what do you do if someone has been killed or died? How do you care for people you love? Not by activating the National Guard.
Right. Not by using chemical weapons. And and I guess that brings up a question in regards to, asks that have been made directly to Mayor Fry, that if you became the mayor, would you issue a directive barring MPD from using those chemical weapons and quote, less lethal munitions?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the tear gas is already not allowed in war, but the fact that we can use it in residential areas is abhorrent, honestly. And anyone who has been on the ground or watched the Unicorn Riot stream has seen that these less lethal weapons are not used according to the guidelines that make them less lethal, right?
Right.
And it's very hard to use them in that way.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're just not accurate.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I remember at the occupation of the 4th precinct, having an officer directly point a targeting weapon like directly at me from a very close range, and it wasn't pointed like low at my body. It was definitely pointed more toward my head. And that's something that is intimidating for sure, and not something that anybody wants to deal with.
Do we still have Sheila? You're back.
I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. Things happen. What I was very excited to ask you was about the senior caucus endorsement. Are you disappointed you didn't get it?
Oh, you read that endorsement questionnaire, right? The questions?
Yeah, I did. You were very straightforward. I didn't feel like Philippe Cunningham's answers were amazing. You didn't take that approach. You were very nice.
Great. I'm so glad. Okay, I learned a lot in my screening with them. So what I learned, because when I read the questionnaire at first, I was like, this is really not considering the experiences of everyone in the city. But what I learned in this question, and so they were asking me about drive-throughs, right? And I talked about how, yes, I support the drive-through moratorium because we need to transition to a less car-centric Minneapolis. And what I learned in talking with folks who are on the senior caucus is that it was less about being able to go and pick up medication in the drive-through and more about being able to get out of the house and go do stuff. And one of the caucus members said to me, so it sounds to me like you just want us to stay shut up in our houses all day. And so what I heard from that was like a feeling of deep isolation during COVID. And so while I think policy-wise, the caucus and I don't see eye to eye, I did learn a lot from that screening that helped me understand their perspective better in a way that I hadn't seen it before. I was like, oh, drive-throughs, whatever,
Well, I'm glad that story had a happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime that drive-throughs get questioned, I always get concerned about the safety of people who are advocating to not have them.
It's kind of amazing that made the top list of issues there. I didn't expect drive-throughs to be on the list.
Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about strong mayor. I think you're against the strong mayor charter amendment, but my question is, why wouldn't you want to be a strong mayor? All the power.
So the reason, many reasons, but running for mayor has only, LOL, strengthened my resolve against a strong mayor charter amendment, because I'm hoping it's different this time, but running for mayor in order to win costs a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And so by design, we get candidates mostly, again, trying to be the exception here, but who are richer and whiter and connected to networks that are wealthy and white. So that's the representation we get in the mayor's office and city council, right? It costs a lot less money to run a successful race. There's a lot more opportunities for direct engagement between residents and city council members, especially if we increase the communication staff. And also, I do think there's a problem, right? I think there's an issue in that city staff are having to do a ton of work, right? They take on these staff directions, they're doing new work without more resources. But the answer is not to shift the power to the mayor's office. The answer is to give enough capacity to these accountable city council offices to be able to do that legislative research, do that legislative work. And yeah, people are deeply divided on this issue. And I think that also we have to take a step back and look at it in its most simple form and think, after 4 years of Donald Trump, do you really want to concentrate power under one person if you don't have to?
Yeah, even if it's a good person, you're kind of bottlenecking that person's capacity. Like maybe I'm a mayor who doesn't want to focus on transportation, and all these transportation decisions come to me and they kind of get lost in the shuffle. Like I like having a council with a diverse set of priorities where certain people can take the lead, but I won't go too long about, my preferences there. Let's talk about the Public Works Department. What are you looking for in an potential appointment to the Public Works Department as a director?
Oh, that's a great question.
John, you're full of great questions tonight.
That's why I'm the podfather.
And the oh my God. And the senior caucus had a lot of public works questions. They have a pothole in, what's the neighborhood? Howe? It must be Howe. That's called the Don Fraser pothole because it's been around since Don Fraser, apparently.
Former mayoral candidate Cam Winton once stood in a pothole and posted that to Twitter, like 2013. I think that was his big campaign issue, standing in potholes.
Wow. I didn't even think about taking that approach. I do remember that, seeing on the internet some city where they drew penises around potholes in order to draw attention to get them fixed. I hope that under Mayor Sheila's leadership, we will not have to resort to that level of public activism. But I think, we need to look at how this term gets used so wildly, but like how we are instilling equity into our public works department. I lived in East Phillips for a long time, and our streets were really poorly maintained. We're always the last ones to be towed, or last ones to be plowed, first ones to be towed. Yeah, but I don't need to do some more thinking about that, because I haven't thought about what the qualities of the person leading it. I mean,
so
I have an idea.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's always wise to be able to admit that, you don't necessarily know the answer. I do see that John looks like ran into the same issue that you did, where he got booted. But so just as something to pass the time while he manages to get back in, I don't know if you knew, last winter we had kind of a running joke about the snow mayor, which was like a nightmare kind of concept. But once there was snow on the ground, somebody specific took over and, had to be the one to order the plows. And
am I back, everyone?
You are back.
Okay. You are, John.
Did I miss a really good answer? You can lie to me.
I mean,
no, but I did learn about the snow mayor, which I would like to officially re-record my answer, in that I will appoint 2 public works directors, one of which will be a snow mayor.
Okay, hopefully it's somebody who cares about climate change and racial justice and street designs that serve those concerns.
Are you volunteering? Is that what you're doing here, John?
No, I'm not qualified. Not qualified.
I've been getting a lot of those volunteer offers as a candidate. It's been interesting.
Okay, I'm ready to go on to housing. As I read
great.
your survey answers on housing, there's a lot to like, but there's one part where there's a bit of a suggestion that you see part of the problem in housing unaffordability as the construction of market rate housing. Isn't the problem really that all levels of government haven't invested or have disinvested in deeply affordable and public housing? Just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how you diagnose the problem.
Yeah, thank you. How I guess I see the existence of, like, say, the Sophie that's by my house as a symptom, as a result of the priorities of the current system, um, and the current way that we define affordability, right? Which is not truly affordable for most people who live here. So I think the existence of those buildings standalone is not the driver. I think, if I heard you correctly, it's the fact that we're not prioritizing building housing that everyone can afford.
Okay, so it sounds like we agree. It's just a matter of emphasis, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's like, it's a powerful illustration, right? Because talking about housing, unless you are a nerd, is right. Like AMI, and people are like, "What is that? I don't care. What do you mean?" And so I use the illustration of, say, I live a few blocks from Powderhorn Park where people are living outside. And then if you go down to the Sophie, I know it was almost entirely empty for the whole summer. That is a moral failure in the way the city does housing work,
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know who's at fault, if we should blame you or me.
Remember the beginning when I said that I know what it's like to be targeted? Who's the top enemy of the state in this room, huh?
It's the deep state, yeah.
It's a joke, but it's not a joke.
It was going too well. They knew this would be good for you.
Yeah. The people don't want you to speak directly to the people.
So I had asked you a question, probably as a brief answer, about parking minimums, whether we should eliminate them entirely citywide, which is currently before the council.
Yeah, I mean, that seems fine to me. My main concern is about parking for disabled folks. My best friend walks with a cane and moved out of the state because it was just too hard to walk on sidewalks and get to stores. So I would like to make sure that what parking exists has spots for, like, marked handicap parking spots. And that's the priority of folks who are using cars as a mobility need, right?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And single room occupancy. I can answer this one for you. You're in favor of it, so.
I am.
Right? Okay. We can move on to what's your favorite bus route? Anton's mom instructed me to ask this question, so I'm just making it a staple.
My favorite bus route is, well, the one I have the most emotional attachment to is riding the 2, which I rode to grad school every day. And I worked in restaurants for like 10 years. And so I would run into my friends who are on their way to their shift, and sometimes would meet up with them at the restaurant or the bar, and we'd end up taking the bus home together. So that's my emotional attachment.
The 2 is getting a lot of love on your podcast, John.
It is. There's so many buses come to the Wedge. Everyone's favorite bus is a bus that comes to the Wedge. I feel bus rich.
You should. I mean, you were able to take a bus to get vaccinated. That's huge.
Yeah, to St. Louis Park. It's kind of irritating.
So
I have a really good question that I want to end on, and I hope we don't have technical difficulties that interrupt your answer. Jason, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I actually do.
Okay,
This is this
you
is
go, and we'll end
this
on
is
mine.
my quick ending of the podcast question. Um, what is the best place to go for Persian food in the Twin Cities?
Oh, so the Caspian Bistro, which is in Dinkytown. I have been going there since I was a literal baby. They would put me underneath the table next to the radiator to stay warm back when it was just like concrete and some folding tables. And now it is beautiful and you can get the best kebab, and say hello to Hussein for me. Yes, Caspian, 100%.
That's a great answer. That is the place that Mitra Jalali directed me to. And yeah, I was wondering if that would be your answer as well.
We have a consensus.
I love the fact that it is a restaurant and a little grocery store. You can buy rose water for any reason that you need to at an extremely cheap price.
It's true.
So, yeah.
Are we ready
All
for
right.
my big, amazing finish question?
Yes.
I'm ready.
Okay. So running for mayor is a big new experience for you. You haven't done it before, right?
Correct.
It's new. I think you were interviewed in Vanity Fair recently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was impressive. That's probably something new for you too. So can you talk about what's been difficult or new, or any ways it's forced you out of a comfort zone, and maybe reflect on how you've grown as a person through this process?
Yeah. Despite being a Gemini, have never talked about myself so much in my entire life. And, I'm an organizer, so I like to build in coalition. The movements I've been a part of are Black-led movements, and I've played more of a behind-the-scenes role. And so running for mayor, I've really had to get comfortable tooting my own horn, as it were. And one of the most challenging parts has been really the sexism I've experienced has been just like abrupt. Yeah, running as a woman candidate is hard. Some people still just don't think that women are as smart as men, which I knew objectively that contingent exists, but I had not interacted with them in quite some time. So I've had to develop a little bit of a
Are we
thick skin
talking about the
around
senior
that.
caucus here?
Unfortunately, not just the senior caucus. It has been broader than that. But yeah, so that's been, it turns out sexism is still real, I guess.
Yeah, wait. If you win, wait till what happens.
And that's maybe not a hopeful note to end on. I will say I have been really heartened by the level of support that I've gotten. And before I decided to run, I held a series of meetings with folks from my community and the broader community and said, hey, do you want me to run for mayor? Is this something that would be good and helpful? And people were excited about it. And the momentum has just grown. And Vanity Fair, yeah, that was fun. So yeah, being on the Wedge Live podcast, if you would have told 2017 Sheila she would be on the Wedge Live podcast running for mayor, she wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah. People would have thought you were talking about Carol Becker's podcast.
Exactly.
But that's kind of refreshing, checking with other people to see if anyone wants you to run. That's new for mayoral candidates, right?
And here's the thing is the mayor, right, under our current weak mayor system, quote unquote, a big part of the role is coalition building, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what we need, and part of why I was motivated to run, is that I move and build in coalitions and alongside people. And I think that's what we need in mayor, right? We don't need someone whose singular vision is the vision for the city. It's about people who can bring in as many voices and as much representation into the room as possible. And that's why I started out that way. And it's very hard to run for mayor. So I also wanted to make sure that there were some people who would have my back in this process to deal with aforementioned sexism.
Yeah, it's hard if you do it right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, I think this is where we ended. I'm very nervous that we're gonna have technical difficulties again. So I'm so ready to get out of it and end on a good note. So Sheila Nezhad is running for mayor. Thank you for spending so much of your campaign season with us here today. And Jason has been my co-host, Jason Garcia. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sheila. Don't forget to plug Sheila's website, Sheila for the People.
.com or .org?
.com.
Okay, you're a com.
You're a commercial entity.
Mm-hmm.
And feel free to have final parting words, Sheila. I'll edit my awkwardness out.
Well, thank you, Jason and John, for having me on here. I hope that we can talk again soon. And I hope that my two cats, Charlie and Penelope, can make it onto the Central Neighborhood Expansion cat tour.
Do you have animals to show us?
Well, you know what? Okay, she's sleeping. I can't.
Okay, no
but
pressure.
I can, you know what I can send you is a Photoshop cutout of Ruby's head where she bears a striking resemblance to Karl Marx.
Okay. I'll just paste that over. I'll paste that on the screen at the end.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great. I will send
John,
that over. Yep.
Could you paste that onto your cat painting?
Behind me? I don't know.
Yeah.
This is kind of my signature cat painting. I don't want to deface it.
I think you could add an extra animal in there for sure. Just Ruby sort of sleeping gently.
So one thing I worry about is if someone has never watched the show and they see that, does it scare them? Like what have I come? Where am I? Why am I here?
I feel like anybody who is knowingly watching the Wedge Live podcast on YouTube is prepared to see some things.
Okay, let's end on that note. Goodbye, everyone.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Calling out cat people. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.